I'm Bill Borner. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm currently serving as the interim vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also serve as the Title IX coordinator. I've actually been a Title IX coordinator for the last decade, working at 2 different institutions. Been here at the colleges for the last 3 years, in my 4th year now, which feels like I'm a senior. I don't get to graduate though, but it's nice to be here. I will be serving as our host today to help us move on. And I also wanted to give a little airtime to Laura and Liz to introduce themselves and share a little bit about them. So Laura, why don't you take us off?
Thanks, Bill. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura Tickner. I use she, her pronouns. I am the program coordinator for Title IX and DEI, and I'm also the deputy Title IX coordinator here at the colleges. I started working in higher ed in 2019, and I feel like I'm on the path of never leaving. I've enjoyed it so much. And at my previous institution, I did become a Title IX investigator, and as a previous college athlete, I feel like this may have kind of driven me into the direction of where I am today. So thank you for joining us.
And Liz?
Thanks, Laura and Bill. My name is Liz Dennison. I'm the Associate Athletic Director and Senior Woman Administrator at Hobart and William Smith, and have only been at HWS at the colleges for about almost a year now, but very much enjoying my time and excited to be here with all of you. And I'll talk a little bit more about my background as we get into the program, but very much driven by what Title IX did for women in athletics. So excited to explore that more this evening.
And has the best background, I would say. I'm assuming you're not sitting outside in front of the field right now. But
field. It's my virtual background.
So a couple of quick things we are for tonight's session. We're just going to make sure we're grounded in a little bit about understanding Title IX, some of the background and historical perspectives over the last 50 years. Well, Liz will start us off, get us kind of grounded then to what this has meant for HWS a little bit the last 50 years, and share her personal story as well, and not as an athlete here at HWS, but as a student athlete. Laura will also share her personal story. So coming from the big down to the individual level, we're going to then talk about kind of what's happening right now in Title IX, and open up for a discussion of where we're going here in the future. And that's going to be our session today. But so many of you know, and happy birthday, we are here for the 50th birthday of Title IX. I don't know if 50 years, is that like a diamond? No, it's not diamonds. That's like 70, I think. Is this gold? What's the gifts that you give for 50th anniversaries and birthdays? I guess the gift we're giving is webinar. Maybe it's a tech gift. I don't know. But so many of you obviously know what Title IX is. It's an educational amendment that was enacted in 1972. Hence 50 years ago. And up on the screen, these 37 words is actually what the Title IX amendment actually is. This was snuck into other legislation that provided in the K through 12 arena, as well as higher education, that this would be free from sex discrimination. And I always like to think of Title IX as a giant big umbrella, this protection, free from sex discrimination. And under that umbrella are other important elements, factors, things that are protected, guided, supported from that big protection of Title IX. Some of that might look like gender equity in athletics and sports, which we're highlighting a little bit today. Some of that might look like gender equity in financial aid or in salary support. Some of that might look like sexual violence prevention and response, which is some of the work that Laura and I do here at the colleges. So I wanted to kind of ground us in this legislation and this federal law. But let's go through a little bit of a history lesson here. And think about where we've come. And what's amazing to me is how much change has actually happened over the last decade of my career in Title IX, and how much scrutiny, how much change has taken place in those last 10 years. But so I don't know if people really know this, but the Civil Rights Act of 1964 actually didn't prohibit sex discrimination. And so this amendment was basically a response to the Civil Rights Act omitting this. And so it's helpful that this then went into effect. It was signed by President Nixon at the time. And what I think about the hilarity, the juxtaposition here of early 70s, the NCAA, which we know as a supporter and a partner in this work, actually challenged the legality of Title IX at that time. It's interesting to me that so much of this now was something that the NCAA was trying to push and dismantle, not ensuring that this was healthy and justified and robust. Ultimately in so that challenge came in 1976, only a few short years after Title IX was enacted. Colleges and the K through 12 arena were eventually forced to comply with Title IX in 1978, which happens to be when I was born. Fast forward a little bit more, 1980 is when the Department of Education was actually established. And the Department of Education, Federal Department of Education, was then commanded Title IX. It was underneath its arm of the Office for Civil Rights, which falls under the Department of Education. And with it then came new regulations, came new oversight, came new slews of lawsuits and challenges to that regulation and oversight. And so I'm fast forwarding even further along here, but thinking about that, kind of floating for 8 years without any oversight guidance. So we have this law, then without oversight and guidance, in swoops in OCR and the Department of Education in the 80s to help ensure that that's moving forward. And then, ultimately the legalities and challenges that happened because of that. I know as a child of the 80s and 90s, how much then there was growth in the athletic arena, specifically in the 80s and 90s, because of what Title IX had established and produced. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more today as well. But thinking about that perspective, the push for gender equity was not without its legal challenges as well. Fast forward, I'm skipping a couple decades here to 2011, because this is when much of the last decade, there's been so much scrutiny, guidance, support, engagement around this area. In the Title IX world, that's called the Dear Colleague era. This was a specific letter that was issued under the Obama administration at the time that provided, finally, clear guidance to colleges and universities, particularly, that Title IX protects against sexual harassment and sexual violence, and it applies to all students equally. It established specifically Title IX coordinators as neutral parties. Many institutions at that time didn't have responses to this, did not have coordinated approaches, didn't have policies that provided grievance procedures for students, faculty, and staff to be able to engage with. As a student of the 90s in college, this wasn't discussed. There wasn't someone to go to for support. There wasn't policies and a person, a Title IX office to be able to engage around these types of issues. There wasn't sexual violence prevention and response happening. There may have been some response in regards to women's and gender centers on some of our college campuses, but really this 2011 kind of landmark moment in the Title IX, fast forwarding us, moving this forward, ensuring that colleges and universities specifically were complying with this educational amendment. Athletics was also addressed in the 2011 Dear Colleague letter to ensure that they're following the same disciplinary system as all other students. So no longer could someone who's an athlete be accused of some type of wrongdoing or violation of Title IX and just then miss a game or run extra laps. That wouldn't just be managed within an athletic department or a team. It'd be something that the disciplinary response would have to be as equal to a student who's not an athlete, who maybe was moved through some type of hearing process or investigatory process. And so ensuring that equity is also a part of this was issued in that 2011 piece. Fast forward a little bit more, as a New York State school, we were involved in the 2015 New York State legislation known as 129B, the Enough is Enough legislation that was enacted that required all colleges and universities, whether they were private or public, to have the same policies around consent, instituted specific measures and responsibilities for the Title IX coordinator, instituted specific responsibilities around campus climate check for sexual violence prevention and response. This was groundbreaking. Many other states followed suit. California was also around the same time issuing these types of specific laws statewide to ensure protections and practices were happening at the collegiate level. I think that's really important to think about. As a Title IX coordinator at that time, it blew up the process, the system. It created, it offered support and guidance and engagement. It was an opportunity, I think, for us to really ensure consistency across the board. And it didn't come without its problems, but it's an opportunity that I think we're still seeing the effects of today. Fast forward a little bit more here to our present day era. We saw protections given that linked to Title IX. So specifically under the Obama administration, protection was given to transgender students were specifically protected under sex-based discrimination under Title IX. And then this was later rolled back during the Trump administration, later then provided back again in 2020. There was a court ruling that identified discrimination on the basis of gender identity is considered discrimination on the basis of sex. So it's interesting that is still within the news today, this idea of are transgender athletes, are transgender students protected under Title IX as well? There's still debate and challenges to that right now. We're also seeing, the Me Too movement, the idea of new regulations even coming out now. So you'll see in our later slide over 200,000 comments to the Biden administration's revision of the Title IX regulations federally for colleges and universities. Very highly regulated system that's happening right now, and continued scrutiny around that. What I think's amazing is to think about this 50-year history of just 37 words, and that changed the course of education, that is continuing to change the course of education for those of us that work in this arena, as well as the course for athletics and that arena as well, and really moving us as a society towards gender equality. In 1972, so a little bit of some data for you, about 300,000 of the nation's 4 million high school athletes were female, a mere 7%. So in 1972, high school athletes, only 7% identified as female. In 2019, 3.4 million girls and women competed in high school sports, accounting for 43% of high school athletes. And I'm imagining that has only gone up. That's from 2019. So what a difference, 7% to 43%. It's taken 50 years to get that far, but I'm glad to take us on a little bit of a history lesson here as we think through over this time, the growth, the change, the challenges, the work that continues to progress here. So I'm going to turn us over to Liz here to take us again from kind of this larger, bigger picture of Title IX to bring us to HWS and specifically to our William Smith Herons.
Yes, thanks, Bill. So as you can see here, in 1972, William Smith Athletics was comprised of only 5 teams and 3 coaches, some of whom are in attendance tonight, some of whom are still coaching now. And then since then, the department has grown widely and rapidly into a powerhouse it is today, with over 250 athletes and growing with the addition of more sports. And what I think is being new to HWS and continuing to learn more about William Smith, what I think is so special about William Smith athletics is this coordinate system and the identity of being a Heron. And what has impressed me since joining William Smith is understanding that rich tradition that our coaches and our current student athletes really embrace. And a lot of that is due to the hard work of people like this that are mentioned on this slide, as well as the athletes that have come before them to advocate for change, for opportunity for women in sport. And certainly that's not William Smith specific, as Bill talked about, that was across the country. But William Smith was really a pioneering athletic department in that time. And it's our job as people who work there now and our students now to both remember that history and then continue to move it forward. A few weeks ago, we had a celebration, our Heron Hall of Honor celebration, where we induct former graduates, administrators, coaches into our Hall of Fame for William Smith Athletics. And we partnered that with a celebration of Title IX. And one of our former coaches who's in attendance today, Sally Scatton, spoke about the impact of Title IX, not only on William Smith athletics, but also globally, and also the work that remains for us to do. And she spoke about the hard work to have opportunity, the struggles, the fight for equipment, how things used to be with travel back then, which is far different from our athletes and how they function now. And we are thankful for that. But we absolutely know that the work is not done and that we need to continue to advance that, both in opportunity, in funding, in continuing to grow women in sport. And that's something that we'll talk a little bit more about tonight. But as I think about my own personal journey, I think some of that is certainly relevant to thinking about the history of William Smith athletics. I grew up playing sports. As Bill mentioned, youth sports has grown tremendously here in this country, in a large part thanks to Title IX. And that access to youth sports is something that I think many people take for granted now and don't realize what a big change that is relative to not so long ago here in this country. I played soccer, basketball, all of the sports. A big defining moment for me was getting cut from the soccer team around 8th or 9th grade. And that was what I thought was my sport. And as a result of that, it was a conversation about what to do instead. And I was lucky enough to have that opportunity to really explore anything that I wanted to because of things like Title IX, creating those opportunities for me as a young athlete to in essence, pick something else. I chose rowing, as you can see on this slide. And that was really a defining moment for me. I went on to row in college. I went on to become a rowing coach and now an athletic administrator. So rowing not only opened doors for me and taught me about teamwork and made lifelong friendships and taught me a lot of lessons that I take with me every day, but it also opened up opportunities for me to be a student athlete in college, to pursue my goals, both academically and athletically. And then really, as I said, defined my career. And I made a career out of being a coach and now an athletic administrator. And without Title IX opening up those opportunities for women, that would not be the case for me. My role at HWS is also as the senior woman administrator. And while that is not directly related to Title IX, I think it's an important point to make that the SWA designation is really meant to promote representation of women in leadership in the college sports. And it's not a required thing, but about 99% of colleges choose to have that. It started in 1981, the same year that the NCAA started women's championships. And it was really there to ensure women were involved in what was and still is a male-dominated administration of college athletics. So I think that's an important thing that was definitely a byproduct of the advancement of women in sports that was in thanks to Title IX. And while we've made great strides in this area, and it's something that certainly, as I said, that has defined my career, since the passage of Title IX 50 years ago, while female sport participation is at an all-time high, women coaching women or women coaching in collegiate athletics is at an all-time low. So around 90% of coaches in 1974, when women's athletics really took off in part because of, or thanks to Title IX, 90% of them were coaching women. Women were coaching women. And now we're at an all-time low of around 40 to 42%. And they do a study every year, both for Division I athletics as well as Division II and Division III athletics at the college level, that takes a look at that. And if you're interested in that, the Tucker Center, the Tucker Report is what to Google. And it's really interesting data if you ever want to dig into it. But that's just an example of, while participation and opportunity has skyrocketed at every level, from youth sport to collegiate, the level and beyond, there's still work to be done to ensure that women have a seat at the table at the administrative level, at the coaching level, and continue to have a place in sport. So I thought I would point that out as we talk a little bit more. And going back to William Smith athletics, I think it's really a place where women have had that seat at the table and have driven the culture of being a Heron. And I think those that are here, our student athletes today, would really say that they feel that every day. And I know it's incumbent upon myself, the other administrators, our coaches, to build on that tradition that the women before us at William Smith have started. And Title IX certainly helped to bore out that growth. So I'll turn it over to Laura to talk a little bit about her journey as well.
Thank you, Liz. I loved hearing your story and sharing all of those special details of how you've become who you are today. So just to kind of play off of Liz, I too also grew up playing sports. I tried soccer. I was terrible at it, but mainly I did swim as a young person, and I played volleyball, softball. And I remember I decided to quit swimming. I was like, this is too hard. I don't want to do it. And I did decide to quit swimming when I was in middle school. I remember my coach had told me that if I would continue to swim, I could get a scholarship and I could be one of the fastest swimmers. And I just didn't care, because at that point I was like, I didn't want to do it anymore. Fast forward to my time at MCC back in 2015, my swim coach in college, Dan Dubois, he recruited me actually out of lifeguarding class. I knew that I still had a love for swimming. I knew that my journey wasn't over, and he saw something in me and took a chance on me. After not swimming competitively for 6 years, I joined a college swim team, and I was able to make it to nationals with my team. And it was an amazing experience because of the kindness and energy that came out of that program. And both my coaches, Coach Dan and Dale, it was a co-ed swim team. And at times, you'd feel like, oh, I'm never going to be as fast as the guys, things like that. But the one thing I can say is that there never was a time where they didn't treat us. We all were treated very equally. We were all given the same opportunities. And my coaches really leveraged that and showed us like who we could be. Title IX allowed me to do what I love, and it's to swim. But it also gave me the chance to have an education and to lead the way for other young girls and women. After college, through college, I was a lifeguard, but then after college, I did coach 2 club teams. I became a swim instructor, and I continued being a lifeguard. I remember back when I started swimming, we had the Title IX talk, we called it, and something I just wasn't really aware of, that, our athletics, our education, something that like protected us. And that kind of jump-started my interest in Title IX, which led me to become a Title IX investigator in my professional career. And now here I am as a Title IX program coordinator, working on prevention education efforts, but also now taking disclosures of sexual discrimination. And I hope that I can lead the way for others. But Title IX made it possible for me to explore the endless opportunities and be excited for what's to come. So thank you.
Before we move on, I'm going to put both of you on the spot and ask you to tell us, who is your role model? So, I think it's interesting to to have that long, career in sports, to maybe stop, have like a hardship, but continuation. Did you have an athlete role model, or someone in your life who helped you continue on that journey? And I'm curious a little bit about that.
It's interesting because when I think about who my role models have been, they've actually all been coaches. So if that doesn't say anything, I mean, my cheerleading coach, I also was a cheerleader in high school, believe it or not. My cheerleading coach, Tammy, she really led the way for me, and she helped me quite a bit in high school to get through. But truly, my two swim coaches in college are my biggest mentors, and I carry what they taught me through my life, and I will forever do that. So very grateful for them.
I think two ways to answer your question. One, I think, as I mentioned, when I was transitioning and finding rowing as my sport, I will credit my parents, because my mom said, instead of, oh, it's terrible what's happened and what are we going to do now, when I didn't make the team I thought was, I was going to make. Instead, it was, well, what do you want to do instead? Like, just very, here are all the options. And I think, again, I'm very thankful I had those options on a variety of levels, but that I had someone in my life who just said, you just keep going, you keep trying different things. And that's how you handle those types of setbacks. So that I think was certainly a defining moment for me. But in terms of a role model, I'll echo what Laura said. The woman who recruited me to row at Georgetown, excuse me, was my freshman year coach there. She was really a role model for me then. But then she moved on to a different university, and later she was who hired me as my first full-time assistant coaching job. And I worked for her for 5 years or 6 years before I became a head coach. So she was not only someone who was my coach, but then she was my colleague, my boss, my, now my good friend. And so I think that does happen often in athletics, whether it's a teammate, a coach, that you really keep those lifelong relationships that can really help define you. So that would be who I would say would be my mentor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think about the opportunity to guide and mentor young people. So we all work with students here. We have an opportunity to guide and mentor and engage young people in our life here, but how pivotal and impactful coaches can be. And also thinking about that, if we only have male identified coaches in our youth programs, in our high school and collegiate programs. I'm not saying that men can't be wonderful mentors and engagers and supporters of our women and girls, but I think about what a missed opportunity for folks to see someone else in that, to say, yes, I can do that, or I want to do that, or I'm going to aspire to whatever greatness it is because of that coach who's there. And so, I'm thinking about that from the perspective of bringing our conversation to present day, where we are now, what's kind of going on, what's happening. In preparing for this webinar, we thought a little bit about kind of what's in the news right now. And up on your screen, you will see a viral video that went around after the 2021 NCAA women's basketball tournament. I will tell you right now, the video is not sound-wise working, but Laura, if you just want to hit play, you'll see some interesting kind of differences, if you will, in how the NCAA tournament has set up the weight room for male athletes, as well as the weight room for female athletes. This is I think Oregon is so this is the female weight room, Oregon player here. It's the men's weight room. A little difference, I would say there. There's a comment that came out once these pictures started to go viral. The NCAA identified basically that there was a problem. And so Sabrina, the athlete here, is talking about this is the space for their practice room. And here's all the rest of the space that's pretty open for this opportunity. And she ends this video in a great way, saying, if you're not upset about this problem, you're part of the problem, basically. And I think that's really impactful to think about this equity. This isn't just about getting the opportunity to play. There's many more elements that surround this that I think are important to kind of highlight and push and talk about. But I pulled from the last 2 months, basically, just a quick Google search of Title IX in the news, and lots of interesting things are coming up. So equal pay for professional soccer athletes, information about the new Title IX regulation and rules that came out from the Biden administration, and they're in a specific comment period. They allowed people to comment on the new regulations. I think it's actually now over 300,000 comments when that closed. And the Office for Civil Rights out of the Federal Department of Education is reviewing those comments right now and considering any changes to the new Title IX regulations that would come out and impact on our campus, our policies and procedures. Thinking a little bit about, again, we brought this up before, but how under LGBTQ plus protection has been kind of flip-flop as to, is this supported under Title IX, is this not? Some states taking this in their own hands. There was a specific walkout last week in Virginia about restricting protections for transgender students. Also in Ohio, facing some concerns about that. When we were also starting to kind of expand a little bit beyond, what does this look like for youth and access to programs and access to sports as a young person. So both Laura and Liz talked about that. We started to think a little bit about the intersectionality here of not just gender identity, sex, but also if we open a door for one, does it open doors for others? So we were thinking a little bit about from a socioeconomic standpoint, and has this is an interesting New York Times op-ed piece that have we allowed money basically to control youth sports, and there isn't even the amount of money to put towards and to be able to play is pretty enormous, and so is that dividing the opportunities there? And so it was kind of, I think, important to think about the intersectionality here, the impact of socioeconomic status, the impact of race to this aspect. So we want to kind of just throw some stuff out there. I'd love to kind of get Liz and Laura's take on kind of what's going on today, right now, but I'd also love to have some of our attendees chime in too. Feel free to pop in anything in the chat, your thoughts on kind of where we're at with Title IX today. And I'd love to maybe even think about what is our hopes for the next 50 years when someone's doing whatever webinars will be called then, in the next 50 years, what is this going to look like? What will be the headlines that, Laura, Liz, thoughts?
Well, Bill, I'll touch a little bit on what you said of the opinion article here that's on the screen. Have we allowed money to ruin youth sports? And I know I brought this up earlier when we met this week and have been thinking about it, read that opinion article and have been thinking about youth sports a lot. My job prior to HWS was an athletic director at an all-girls private school. And what I loved about that job was that it was all about women. And it really was, you could really see Title IX in action every day. And every facility improvement we made, every program we did supported girls in sport. So that was a really sort of an aside comment here, but I think that's something that I really enjoyed, and you can see your impacts on that. Now, switching a little bit back to the opinion article, that experience in youth sports really got me thinking about access. And we talked about how youth sport access has grown substantially since 1974. And thanks to Title IX, and what a wonderful thing that is. But I think, as Bill said, as access opens up and things shift and landscape shift, we have to continue to be aware of how we keep that access open to everyone. And youth sports has really become different in its model than it originally created. A lot of it was recreational based, town based, kind of participation based. And certainly that still exists in many places. But there's also a really big aspect of youth sports, of club sports, and traveling very far, and preparing our youth for their goals, be it collegiate or beyond. And certainly that's an important aspect of youth sports as well, and meeting students and players where they are and making sure they get that development. But I know I'm in tune with what that does in terms of access and what opportunities there are, and trying to make sure there's a balance between the different types of youth sport opportunities to match the interest levels of our youth out there. So I think that's an important topic to think about. And while not maybe directly related to Title IX, certainly tangentially related in terms of what opportunities there are to be involved in sport. And do you have to want to be a college athlete to play sports in high school or middle school or beyond? And I think from that as well, the pressure to specialize, certainly not probably a topic for this webinar, another one I could host separately. But I think, just that all of those pressures can change how people approach sport and how they feel that they can continue to have it be a part of their day or a part of their environment, depending on their goals. And I know, as someone who, as I've said, has made athletics my career, certainly I had aspirations to play my sport in college and did so, but I wouldn't want anyone not to be able to pursue athletics at whatever level is the best for them. And so, I hope that we're able to continue to find models that include all the different ways to access athletics and have it be something that teaches you lessons far beyond the field. So I think it's a timely topic, and I think one that certainly is related to Title IX and how we continue to see this law in action.
Laura, as a swimmer, I'm curious to hear maybe some takes on, we could also leave an entire webinar about this, but there's been a lot of attention on specifically in swimming. The name of the athlete is escaping me, and so I apologize for that, but the idea of someone who transitioned and is now swimming for a different team. So started out on the men's team, transitioned during college, and is now swimming for the women's team. And I think earn national, not just attention, but won some of their races and stuff at the national level. I'm just thinking a little bit about that, thoughts on that. That's an interesting kind of angle to this Title IX piece as well. If trans athletes have these protections or not. Leah Thomas, thank you for that. And so, thoughts on that, Laura? I don't mean to put you on the spot about that, but it's certainly in the news right now as well and related to all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough. I mean, I believe my personal opinions and beliefs is that Title IX should protect all individuals. Rather, it does not matter what their sexual orientation or choices are. It's made to protect the young ones and people that are in college and beyond that. So that's kind of like where I'm at with that right now. I know that you and I, Bill, have had a conversation in the office of kind of about it too. And it personally, I don't see it as something that should be as harmful as I feel like a lot of what the articles and the headlines are coming out. I feel like it's very damaging to individuals as well. I think that there's still a long way to go when it comes to educating around transgender youth as well. Something I wanted to touch on based on your question earlier about, what are headlines going to look like in the future? When I read the headline about thousands of Virginia students walk out in protest at governor's trans proposals, our young ones are our future. And I hope that I'm going to continue to see headlines that are focusing on students and young folks taking a stand and speaking up for what they believe in, because I think that that's the way of the world. And I think that that can move our future in a positive direction. Not that it's going to be perfect at all. There will obviously be bumps in the road, but I'm hoping that I continue to see the young ones speak up and now and make change in the world.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how powerful, thank you for that, Laura. It's amazing to me how powerful when athletics partners with social change movements, the opportunities that exist there. I think we're seeing that a lot in the professional sports arena, but I think that's even something like a partnership we do here on our campus. We're clearly doing this now, but you know, it's an opportunity. There's change makers on our fields and courts and pools and arenas, and let's utilize that to make some positive change in our communities. So I want to be mindful of time here and offer an opportunity if there's anyone in our audience with any questions for our panelists or for ourselves. Up on the screen, we pulled up just kind of some fun quotes that Liz provided. Some of the attendees to the recent Heron Hall of Fame ceremony about what Title IX meant to them. Just kind of pop those up on the screen for folks to peruse, but would welcome any questions, comments from our audience. Feel free to type anything into the chat. You're welcome to. Well, while maybe some of our participants are thinking a little bit about that, I'm struck with some of the 50th. I've been to a couple of 50th celebratory webinars and meetings and things. I had an opportunity to listen to Billie Jean King and some of the impact clearly of Title IX and sport, but also thinking about now as I think she's part owner of the Dodgers. And I think a little bit about the back end of things. So clearly in the front, in the headlines, showing and engaging and providing role models and people to aspire to, but also thinking about the back end of policy and of who are the managers, who's in charge, who's responsible for our facilities. You know, thinking about the changes that are happening in referees and umpires. And, you know, I'm sad, I think, to hear a little bit, Liz, some of the statistics you provided about female coaches, female identified coaches, and how we haven't actually seen progress. We've seen a decline in that. And so, you know, I'm just thinking about that. That's my hope, is that there's an infiltration that kind of happens on the back end that will support change and growth and development in that perspective. So I'm not seeing any comments or in the chat, but I wanted to then close us out here and have an opportunity to thank our wonderful guests here, Liz and Laura. Appreciate you sharing your personal story, your connection to Title IX, bringing us back to the great work that's happened here over the last 50 years with William Smith Athletics. Jennifer, thank you so much for helping to host us as well with Family Relations. Always proud to sponsor with you all. Really appreciate everyone's time here on a Tuesday on the eve of Yom Kippur to join us. Thank you so much for being here. If anyone wants to stick around with any other questions, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I know that Liz and Laura and myself and Jennifer are always happy to have comments or chat afterwards. So thanks again for your participation today. I appreciate everyone being here.